Max.
Yep.
Is this a bad sign for the Raiders?
No, it's not a bad sign for the Raiders. Why do you think you got Antonio Brown for a third-round pick? This is what comes with it. You weigh the good with the bad. Look, a word of advice to Antonio Brown. Free advice, Antonio. If I were you, I would keep public statements about football to positive statements about my own team. If I were you, I would just say positive things about the Raiders, no matter what anyone asked me about football. Stephen A., I cannot understand why this man would be talking about JuJu Smith-Schuster like this. Why? Because JuJu said, it's bad juju, as they say. Why? Because JuJu said something positive about Roethlisberger, and somehow, several weeks ago, and somehow AB takes that as a shot against him. Why is it? It just doesn't make any sense. Why would he do that? And JuJu Smith-Schuster hit the nail on the head with his, you really have to have, it's really about insecurity, right? What else would explain why someone would do that? Other than the way they're feeling like they need constant affirmation, they need to put someone else down to feel good about themselves. But in terms of its effect on the team, is it a good one or a bad one? You'd rather him not do that. It does not outweigh the production you get from AB. It mitigates it to an extent, but it doesn't outweigh it. The production you get from AB is so special. Other than Jerry Rice, no one's ever really had a prime like this. It's so special that you put up with the other stuff. But again, that's why you get him for a third rounder and not a first rounder. This is why.
First things first. I think it's a bad sign for the Raiders, and I'll tell you why in a second. But before I go into that, I just want to sit up there and say that, Antonio Brown's position will be that it was nothing personal, that the media is blowing it up to be more than it is. I would know that because I spoke to him. But the reality is this. The fact is that he was wrong. And the reason why he's wrong is because you're talking about a 30-year-old man that has proven to be arguably the best receiver in football consistently over the last 6 years. Antonio Brown, as far as I'm concerned, is the best. He's that elite. He's that great. He's that phenomenal. JuJu Smith-Schuster, however, had a better first 2 years of his NFL career than obviously Antonio Brown had as a sixth-round pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 2010. People could call it jealousy. They could call it a lot of things. I'm not going to disrespect Antonio Brown like that. But what I will say is that it's kind of cruel. Because why would you go at JuJu Smith-Schuster like that? What did he do to you? And I'm telling you as a person that knows Antonio Brown a little bit, that has interviewed JuJu Smith-Schuster personally on a couple of occasions just this past season. He has never, ever, ever said a scintilla of a negative word against Antonio Brown. He has raved about him. He has talked about his greatness. He has talked about what Antonio Brown means to his development, etc. And that's why I appreciate the quote that JuJu Smith-Schuster threw out there. I'm showing you love. Why are you coming at me like this? There is no excuse for it. It's just that simple. Now, let me tell you why it's going to have a negative effect, potentially, on Antonio Brown. Number one, because I don't believe Derek Carr is Big Ben Roethlisberger. Derek Carr's talented. He can ball. He's got a lot to prove, though. And I don't know if he's going to be able to handle the kind of heat that's going to get thrown in his direction. Not just from opponents, but from Antonio Brown, anxious to validate his greatness yet again. If I'm an opposing team, Max and Molly, do you know what I do? I sit up there and I let anybody else beat me.
Right.
I double, I triple team. I do whatever I got to do just to frustrate Antonio Brown because I don't know how he's going to react towards Derek Carr based on what he has said about Big Ben Roethlisberger, based on what he has said about JuJu Smith-Schuster now, along with the Steelers organization. Now, I want to be very, very clear. When it comes to Big Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown had good points. Let's not act like all his points just go out the window. He may not should have said it, but some of the things that he said has been co-signed by guys like Le'Veon Bell, quietly by other people in that locker room. The things that he said about the Steelers organization, as unpopular as they may be, they've been co-signed by some people in that locker room, okay? The problem is that his willingness to speak and to not let go and to not move beyond the Pittsburgh Steelers era and to go after a kid that's 22 years old, like JuJu Smith-Schuster, who can ball, but he's a kid for crying out loud. He didn't do anything to deserve that. Your willingness to articulate and verbalize those frustrations, if I'm an opponent, I sit up there and I test it because Derek Carr and him still have to cultivate chemistry, Max.
You know
and
who
if
looks
I sit
good,
up
though?
there and key on Antonio Brown, who knows how that's going to frustrate him with Derek Carr based
You know
on what we're
looks good?
seeing?
Roethlisberger comes out looking better from this because, yes, some of the stuff you said has been co-signed, for example, by Le'Veon Bell, right? But you don't see Le'Veon Bell getting into it with James Conner like this over social media. But Roethlisberger winds up looking a little better because what people are constantly weighing is, okay, was this a Roethlisberger problem or an AB problem? Looks like an AB problem. And it's not even, like, in terms of how this affects the Raiders, which is really the question, is this a bad sign for the Raiders? One of the reasons, and Ryan Clark mentioned this, one of the reasons that AB performs under pressure, and for example, Odell Beckham dropped those passes, is maybe related to the reason that AB is not a great teammate, right? And Odell is more liked by his teammates. AB does not care what you think about him. He doesn't care, like he's oblivious to it. He's so into himself that, as Tomlin is saying, stay off social media, he's putting it on social media because he doesn't hear the coach. He literally does, he's not listening, he doesn't hear it. So like all this stuff, as the only thing he's really thinking about is himself. If he hears JuJu Smith-Schuster praise Roethlisberger, he takes that as he's saying something about me. Now I have to go at him. The Raiders will have to deal with that. That will be a bad thing. But in exchange, you get Antonio Brown's production, which is among the best
But
ever.
if I can highlight,
he's one of the best who ever lived.
But if I can highlight what frustrates him, and I think that could potentially have a negative effect on the person throwing him the football because the pressure is applied to Derek Carr to feed him because he can't throw it to himself. That could potentially work in my favor. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't know. He's got to stop looking in the rear view. Past is the past. You got paid. You're going to Oakland. Enjoy it.